Welcome to this episode of The Mandate Show. I'm your host, Byron Henry. As you know, on The Mandate, we talk about the intersection of law and politics in the Lone Star State, especially how it applies to grassroots conservatives and activists in the Republican Party. On today's docket, we have a number of topics. It's kind of an exciting time in the Republican Party of Texas. We've got runoff fallout from the May 28th runoff in the Republican primaries. We're also going to be talking about the legislative priorities that were just recently released by the Republican Party of Texas. We're going to talk about unity heading into November, the November election, the presidency, and other important races facing Texas voters and Republicans. To discuss these topics, we have a special guest today. We are joined by the newly elected chair of the Republican Party of Texas, Abraham George, who's going to be discussing this and other topics with us today. First, I want to address an issue that has recently been in the news, and that is the idea of censuring or kicking out of the caucus of conservative Republicans who supposedly violated caucus rules by campaigning for opponents of incumbents. Understandably, there is a caucus rule that frowns upon campaigning against sitting incumbents, your colleagues basically in the Texas House. The rationale for that rule is basically that it's very difficult to actively campaign against your colleague and then basically change the whole narrative and all of a sudden need to work with that person to get bills passed, whether it's conservative priorities or just the management of the House. So the spirit of the rule obviously makes sense. It is aspirational. Obviously, that would in a perfect world, we wouldn't need Republican representatives to campaign against sitting House members, because the sitting House members would be dedicated conservative Republicans serving their constituents and striving to achieve the legislative priorities set forth by their constituents in the Republican Party. Unfortunately, we found ourselves where the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, the Attorney General of Texas, and other House members, and of course the governor, were all campaigning against incumbents for different reasons. For Ken Paxton, it was the impeachment vote. For Dan Patrick, it was probably based on the fact that a lot of Senate things that were passed couldn't get through the House and were killed in the House, and so it was kind of retribution against House management, including the Speaker. Of course, for the governor, it was school choice. And so you had this whole mix of things which led a lot of Republican leaders, conservative leaders, to campaign against some incumbents that basically weren't following through with legislative priorities. And in this case, the caucus basically decided that they were going to have a vote as to whether or not to expel them. Probably a little bit over the top to expel them from the caucus as Republicans. But in any event, that was a big issue. And so just recently, it's come out that they will be censured and not expelled, which is a acceptable result. But we always need to remember that there can never be a rule, whether it be caucus, whether it be unwritten, written, that prohibits an office holder, an elected official, from doing the will of its constituents. In other words, the very job they're asked to do is to represent, as representatives, their constituents. Republican representatives that are elected by the Republican grassroots need to represent the values of their Republican constituencies especially. And so you can't have a rule, regardless of the spirit or the aspirational nature of it, that basically says, we know we want you to elect more conservatives so we can pass our priorities, but you're not really allowed to campaign against that moderate Republican or that liberal Republican or a Republican that supports Democratic chairs or is against school choice. That's not going to work. Luckily here we have a censure before the new caucus is even sworn in. This won't affect any of those representatives' ability to represent their constituents. They will continue to do so, and in fact, they have vowed to continue to do so. That's a good result. The mandate is pleased that those people and other representatives will be able to follow their conscience and their constituents' desires and will with respect to who they campaign for. Now we can move into a fall election season, work to elect Republicans and the legislative priorities that were just released. And with that, along with everything that happened at the Republican convention and the legislative priorities and the runoff, I am so honored to have the newly elected chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, Abraham George.
Well, Byron, thank you for having me here. I do want to talk about this censure thing. You're right. It is in a way, it's an incumbent protection program. That's what it is, because it makes sense, like the way you said, there's one person campaigning against one of their colleagues, then have to go and ask them for a co-sign for one of the bills, or support them for another issue or something like that. It makes sense, but at the same time, like you said, it's really not about the colleagues in the Texas House or in the Senate. It's all about the people who they get elected from. The representation is the constituency is the boss. It's not your another representative in the Texas House or the Senate. So it was interesting to see that they censured them, not expelled them, because there was some talks about that they were going to be expelled. And when I was thinking through that, I thought, okay, these 4 members or conservatives got expelled, and some of the new ones who are coming in not going to join the caucus. This is a perfect way for some of the members or the moderate group of the members can say, well, we now can actually go and select a speaker from the caucus, from our own group of Republicans, not having the conservatives part of it. So I'm glad they went with the censure instead of going with the expel, because that would have made a lot more, it would have complicated the whole speaker election in the next few months. So this is going to be an interesting session, that's for sure.
Yeah, so one of the things we used to discuss, and for all of you who don't know, Abraham and I have been friends for a while. He's from Collin County. He was the chair of the Collin County Republican Party before he ran for House District 89, and then ran for chair of the Republican Party of Texas. So he's from North Texas. He kind of knows the issues. But one of the things we always preached was, if you're unhappy with your House member, you're unhappy with your senator or whatever, right, run someone in the primary. Yep. Back them, run someone. And so primaries can be bitter. They can be tough. Yeah. They can, and if you do it the right way, and if you stay positive and do it the right way, the fallout can be minimal. But if they are too let's say they get a little too extreme and there's bad feelings, it would make it hard to work with people. There could be some bitter feelings and some inability to work together. So the goal here is to have primaries and have a fight, yes, but it's not to do it in such a way that you can never talk to that person again, so to speak.
Right, and it is politics. So there's a level of expectation when you run for something. When I ran for the chair, this just recent election, this was one of the bloodiest elections that I've ever been to. It was much worse than the House district election that I went through. So, but there is an expectation. Okay, so you're running for an office, you're putting yourself out there. You expect to get some beatings on this, So like, people come out and make up stuff, and people come out and dig your background to find anything they can use against you during a campaign. That is expected. The only thing is, well, we are going into November. We still need to beat all and go after the Democrats and elect all the Republicans. So don't damage it too much into a point that we cannot have a Republican reelected or elected.
Yeah, not too personal, not too dirty. Don't do irreparable harm to the party. Right. When you're actually trying to help the party, because your whole goal of electing the right Republican in the primary is because you believe that's best for the party. So it doesn't make any sense to tear it down while you're in the process of trying to build it up. And so hopefully people can put those things behind them and come together. And I think from what I've seen so far, you mentioned the bloody convention. I don't know if bloody is the right word, but it was tough. It was a tough convention. So tell the listeners, for those who either weren't there or don't really understand how it works, just what you had to go through the process to become the chair of the Republican Party.
So the convention is about 9,000 people coming together from all over the state of Texas. All the delegates that get elected through the Senate district conventions, then they get to come and go into the Senate caucuses, and a chairman needs to get 16 caucus Senate districts on their side. So we had 7 people run this time. As far as anyone can remember, this is the first time we had 7 people run for a state chair. And Matt Rinaldi, who was the former chair, endorsed me as soon as he decided he doesn't want to go for re-election. Then Attorney General Ken Paxton came out and endorsed me. So many conservatives endorsed me. So it was a good start for me. Then all of a sudden we have 7 people running. And so this 9,000 people have a choice to pick and choose out of the 7. So we knew going in, we're not going to get a easy 50% at the beginning, 16 senates. So the goal was to get as many senates as possible, then go into a runoff, essentially. So every Senate district choose a chair and a vice chair. Then we got 13. I've got 13 senates in the first, and which I actually was expecting 11. We got 2 more Senate districts on our side, which was a good start.
So you were the leader after the first.
Yes,
out
first
of the gate, you're
round.
the first
Yes,
round.
first round. 13 came on our side. 7 and 7 went to Dana Myers and Weston Martinez. Two of the others were Ben Armenda, Mike Garcia, and Matt Makoviak and Amy Hetke. So between them, they got like 3 or 4 or something like that. So it went into a nominations committee, which a nominations committee is elected from the Senate districts, and they actually have to go with their Senate for the first round of election. Second round, they actually can switch and choose a person. So the second round came, I got 16. So I got 13 from the Senates, then I got 16 at the nominations. So
So at that point, there's 31 districts. You have a majority of the districts.
That's right. I have the majority of the districts on my side. So that puts the committee report into saying, okay, the convention chooses Abraham George as the chairman. But the rules also allow anyone who gets 3 Senate districts on their side can challenge the nominee on the floor. So that's what happened. So this whole thing started Friday early morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. By around 4:30 or so, we are back in the floor, and we're about to go one more round. So Weston Martinez and Dana Myers and my name was automatically placed, and 2 others were nominated from the floor. Now, we went to a floor fight, essentially, and Weston Martinez, his name dropped, and Dana and I went into a final runoff, and we won by 54%, 54-46, which was good. But it was a tough race going all the way in. Then went into the vice chair race. It's the same process there. So good thing with vice chair race was the person who got the second place decided they didn't want to challenge Dorinda, who is the vice chair now. I think she got 14 senates or 13 senates on her side too. So we finally ended up getting our chair race finalized before 6 o'clock or 5:30 or 6. Then had to come back at 9 o'clock after the gala to elect our vice chair. Then we went into finishing our platforms and priorities and all of that stuff until 11:55 at night.
Sounds like to me, just from the news reports, that the delegates stayed late in large numbers to go through the chair fight, the vice chair fight, and the platform. That was a long day, but everyone stayed around, and you had no problem maintaining a quorum, I take it?
No.
But you had plenty of people there of the 9,000?
Yeah, people came back at 9 o'clock. Not everyone went to gala, because gala is limited. It's like $150, $200 per person, so only few people went to that. So everyone went to their rooms and got something to eat and came back at 9 o'clock. I mean, 8:50 or so, the place was packed. And at night. And then they stayed all the way to 11:45. To finish the platform and cast a ballot for their platform choices the next day. The rules tells us that they have to finish the platform by Friday night.
So they had until 11:59 to finish the platform.
Exactly,
Regardless.
and they did stay back, and which also tells us how important the platform is to the grassroots. Because they came back to do this, and none of these people have any titles. They are all regular grassroots members. They spend thousands of dollars coming to San Antonio.
And none of that's paid for. The party,
party doesn't pay any.
no, there's no support for that. You're on your own dime when you travel to Austin, stay 3 or 4 days.
Yes.
Travel to San Antonio, take in the sights, do the Riverwalk,
Yep.
pay for a hotel, stay up all night, get up
right.
early in the morning.
Exactly. And then, so it means a lot to the grassroots. And this is where I get really frustrated with some of our legislators. They look at the platform and say, that doesn't matter. It matters to the people. And the legislators should care about it. And because they spend time and money putting this together, and it matters to the people. You may not be able to agree 100% on every single item on the platform, but it should matter because you're a Republican representative. So,
well, speaking of it mattering, it sounds to me, just based on May 28th, and I'll let you give your take on it on the runoffs, that these differences between Republicans matter. In other words, you got a bunch of Republicans running in runoffs. Some of them have pretty good voting records as Republicans. Some of them have decent voting records as conservatives, but maybe they voted against school choice. Maybe they voted against, maybe they voted to impeach Ken Paxton. Whatever the reason, whether it's a huge difference between the people running or a very small difference, people got out and they made some choices. And from the numbers I've seen, there's never been an incumbency loss rate, or at least not in this generation, in which that number of incumbent legislators lost to challengers in a primary and or runoff combined in the Republican primary.
Right. So we had 150 members, 86 Republicans. 15 of them got replaced this time around, which is a big number. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars pouring into districts and then removing 15 members. And the speaker won by less than 400 votes. So, and which is another issue that we can talk about. It's closing primaries is going to be a major issue for the Republican Party. But the people are waking up to a point like, okay, just because you have an R next to your name doesn't really mean you're really a Republican that we want. There are areas in Texas that, you know, someone from Collin County will be looked at as a far right Republican. Then there are areas in Texas where someone from Collin County will be looked at as a moderate Republican. So it depends on your district, and that's the whole point. Represent your district. Whatever they're asking you to do that, and you'll be fine. So 15 of them got replaced, and like you said, Ken Paxton's impeachment started that. Then property tax issue became much more bigger talking point. Border security became a talking point, and of course the school choice with the Greg Abbott. So.
And a lot, I say a lot, some grassroots activists I've talked to have said that, you know, not having school choice pass last time, and a lot of people were upset that Greg Abbott didn't call another special session and keep them down there and make it happen, but that it actually benefited the idea of school choice, because with a new group and more conservative caucus, Republican caucus, it's likely that whatever school choice bill comes out of the House or out of the legislature will be better than it would have been under the last legislator. So, you know, it's, you know, God closes a door and opens a window. It's possible that there's a blessing in disguise there.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it could be worse for the public education this time around. I mean, and I'm not against public education by any means. I have 2 kids going to public schools. Last time around, Governor Abbott said, okay, we will do all of these incentives for pub ed so we can get these people to come together and support the school choice. This time he doesn't need to. So it depends how he handles that, because he can say, well, I have the numbers. I don't need to give extra funding for pub ed anymore. I can just go and have school choice passed the way I want it, because all of the new representatives have signed on to school choice. A real school choice that's probably one of the strongest ones we're going to have in the entire nation.
Good, and that's not some novel experiment that Texas is trying. The last count, there's upwards of 30 states that have some form, including universal for everyone, but some form of school choice iteration of vouchers or school choice in the country. So this isn't something that Texas is leading on. It's actually way behind the curve nationally on the school choice front.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This was coming. This has been a long time coming to our state, but pub ed. And even though we don't have teachers union per se, we have teachers associations, which is essentially a teachers union. So they've been working and which is essentially a taxpayer funded lobbying issue, and which is going to be one of our priorities. It's been an issue for us for a very long time. Yeah.
And so finally, it looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel for Texans and the governor's plan to bring school choice to Texas.
Yeah.
Great. So some of the other things that we saw recently that came out were on the legislative priorities deal with border enforcement. And I know there's been a lot of news in the interim since the last session about Governor Abbott's efforts building the forward base, deploying the border security force down there. Talk a little bit about what you envision the border security. I know border security, I think it was SB 2, I can't remember, but I think SB 2 died. It was passed by the Senate and died in the House. But other than SB 2, that type of border enforcement or border security, what do you envision the security measures we're talking about on border security that you'd like to see come out of the legislature this session?
Well, the way the Texas Republican Party defined it is, I don't have exact wording in front of me, but that we want to have a homeland security for Texas and have a border patrol agency just for state of Texas. That gives us a ability for our governor and our legislator to fund it properly and actually also close the border if we have to. There are multiple options that's being talked about during the convention, and one of them is actually just closing the border and pulling over every commercial truck that comes through Mexico and say we're not gonna allow you to have interstate commerce until you close the border from your side of the thing, and which is a tough thing to do, but it's a practical thing to do because we have police force who can actually do that. So there is a matter of funding that they talked about, which is an important factor, but also there's a matter of actually doing it. We've been talking about it since 2020 or 2019, essentially end of 2019, and is the border secure? The answer is still no. I mean, it's still wide open. It still can be now with Biden's new executive order. It's essentially legalizing illegal crossings. So Governor Abbott, I got to give him props for everything he's trying to do, but the Texas Senate is on board with almost everything, and the House is not. House plays these games, and we just always gets the worst version of the bill that we can get out of the Texas House.
Weakest version.
Version, yes, comes out of the Texas House. So hopefully that changes this time. And the Texas Republican Party made it very clear how we want to do it, because we want to have a Homeland Security agency for state of Texas. I know this is bigger government, but that's something that people care about so much.
So what about the funding issue? It's been talked about a lot. I've seen the numbers on various news outlets, including some liberal news outlets, that talk about 9-figure costs to states and communities to support, house, medical care, educate illegal aliens,
Yes.
people that are here without papers, that are basically violating the law in the country. Until it doesn't pay, whether it's E-Verify for jobs or education or healthcare or whatever it is, until it doesn't pay to come across the border, I don't see that any administration can stop it in total. Obviously, we can pass bills, we can create a Homeland Security force, we can deport or at least support candidates that supported deportations or stopping return to Mexico policies and things that President Trump had. But what about the funding issue? What it's costing the state of Texas and some communities to house and feed and educate these people that come over?
So the priority also goes into that and says, okay, we will give emergency medical care to an illegal immigrant, emergency medical care. Everything else, no. So no education. You cannot admit them to public education because that's paid for by our tax dollars. You don't get regular medical care. You don't get transportation. You don't get, all of the stuff that housing they're getting today, cell phones and all of the, essentially a reasonably decent package as soon as they walk in. That needs to stop. And that can be stopped by our legislator. This is one of the reasons why the party is asking Governor Abbott to call a special session to put a stop to all the funding. Because if the funding stops, they may go to California or somewhere else, but they actually will stop coming to Texas. And that's a major issue for the party, for the people. It's more than a Republican issue. It's really a Texas issue. It's not a Republican issue. So even Democrats are coming over to our side for this very specific matter. So I don't know how they're going to do it, if they're going to do it. I don't know if Greg Abbott is going to actually call a session to stop the funding. It would be good to see that. It would be very nice to see if he can do that.
But if not, definitely a priority for legislation out of the legislature in 2020, in the next session in 2025. Well, something that is, I think, near and dear to Texans' heart deals with energy. And I know we had the ice apocalypse where we lost a lot of power and people actually died as a result of the freezing temperatures here, which was an anomaly. Everyone agrees, but it spurred a lot of change with respect to the way our grid functions and operates. What it didn't do was spur enough movement to build new coal and natural gas power plants, nuclear power plants, whatever is necessary to have reliable energy in addition to whatever you want to use for solar and wind, but have reliable energy that you never have to tell a Texan again that you lost power because, you know, our grid failed or because we just didn't have enough power to service it. So what is the party's view on the next steps on the grid and the energy policy of the legislature?
Actually, it is a priority, which is, I think, in my opinion, I could be wrong, this is the first time this turned into a priority. We always had it in our platform. We never turned it into a priority. So this time around, that happened, which is a good thing. And I have to give a lot of props to Senator Bob Hall for making it a issue for the state of Texas. So his major thing is he wants to secure the grid. That's a major thing. But also adding power plants that natural and gas and another thing we talked about is actually leveling the playing field for because wind and solar currently gets a bunch of subsidies, and it's almost 70% money is subsidies. That's how they're competing. On top of that, if you get wind or solar energy from your provider, you actually get a lower rate because of that subsidies. So it's really not a free market solution at all. It's not going to last. How many years are we going to subsidize a unreliable energy like this? So the party is taking a stand saying, okay, we want nuclear power, we want gas, natural gas, we want renewable energy is good, but we don't want to turn that into a major issue for state of Texas, especially we being the energy capital of the world. We have the resources here. We don't need to bring it from somewhere else. So that is actually a priority for us. We're working on that. Yeah.
And then there's some other things on the list that have come up before, and obviously either weren't addressed at all or not finished. That's priority with respect to the sexualization of Texas kids. Yeah. And there's the taxpayer-funded lobbying and the Texas is not for sale priorities. And if I remember right, all three of those are making a repeat appearance as priorities, meaning they weren't addressed at all, or they weren't addressed to the satisfaction of the members of the Republican Party.
Of the grassroots. So we have securing the election as a repeat priority, stop sexualizing the Texas kids is a repeated priority, no Democrat chairs is a repeated priority. So we got 3 or 4 out of the 8 that are repeated priorities. And some of them, the stop sexualizing the Texas kids is actually, some of that actually happened, the HB 900, things like that. But it didn't go into the depth that we want. So grassroots members have the right to come back and say, well, you did a great job. We want you to go the extra mile to make sure that this is not happening to our children. So some of those things will be easily workable because most of our members are on board with that. Some of these will be like Democrat chairs. It's going to be a battle for sure.
Well, the issue, I think, and we can get back to the parties in a minute, with respect to the Democrat chairs, kind of dovetails in the Democrats don't support a speaker, a Republican speaker, conservative or not, without expecting something in return. So you put them in chairmanships of the committees. It's not just for show. And so, my question is always, what are we giving up as a party after all this work to make Texas Republican and then make it more conservative and have every statewide office for the past 30 years since 1994 to have a majority in the Texas House, elect more conservatives, go through the primaries to elect 15 more conservative members? What are we giving up when a speaker uses Democratic chairs and other items, political favors, so there's no other way to put it. I mean, it's politics, right? That's the way politics works, to get enough votes to become a speaker. And one of the things I think is that it's not that they're going to vote against transgender, but on the edges, the rest of the bill, the next step in border security, the next step in election security, the next step in stop sexualizing kids, the taxpayer funded lobbying, it doesn't finish the job because we don't have a lock on the process with either Democratic chairs or a speaker that owes allegiance to the other party, even though the Republicans are in the majority.
Yeah, and it always comes back to two things. One is the money. The second one is always been someone's ego that they want to be the speaker, and they go to the Democrats and say, okay, if there's 60 Democrats, they come on board, they only need to get 15 Republicans on their side, which most of the time they can, and they've been doing that for a while. So this is why Republican Party always says elect a Republican, a speaker from the Republican caucus. What's happening today is they're going to the Democrats first, then saying, hey, if you don't support me, I'm going to get the Democrats and 15 Republicans, so you might as well get on board with it. And a lot of our conservative Republicans are like, I don't want to be punished because I'm going against someone like Dade Phelan, who will destroy my bills or put me in a committee that I won't get anything done. Right. So it's turned into a ego issue, and it's turned into a money issue because that's where most of the campaign finance is coming from.
And there's a couple candidates that have said they're going to take their speaker fight all the way to the floor if they have to. So
yes,
so the vote will be open for everyone to see. If someone is elected speaker based on Democratic votes of the other party, then everyone will know it, so there won't be any hiding it. This won't be a whole lot, well, the caucus voted for this person. It'll be the actual members voting on the floor. Right. Well, one of them's in federal overreach, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but to me, in federal overreach is just the overarching view of the Constitution and just the overarching idea that, as Senator Ted Cruz preaches, liberty, that the federal government doesn't need to be in our lives on so many issues like digital currency and transportation restrictions and telling us we can't drive our vehicles, or telling us we can't own cars that have certain gas mileage and whatnot. Yeah. So medical freedom with respect to vaccine choice and things like that. Is that your idea of the in federal overreach? Is what Attorney General Ken Paxton basically all his lawsuits? Exactly. That's basically trying to end federal overreach.
Yeah, it's the 50 lawsuits so far against the Biden administration is basically what it is, and vaccine mandates to toll roads to everything else. Yeah. They need to stay within the Constitution of the United States and say, okay, these are the things given to you. Everything else is us, the states.
Right.
So that's basically what.
So basically, take back our job, take back our role in running our own lives here.
Yeah.
So before we go, talk a little bit about the November election in a minute or so. What's your vision of how the state party and the local parties work together to elect Republicans in November, including Donald Trump and Senator Ted Cruz?
So we have two priorities on this. One is South Texas is a separate priority from the rest of the state because South Texas is moving to our side in the recent elections. We had a really good turnout in 2020. In 2022, that was not the case. But in 24, I think we're going to get that back because with everything going on in South Texas, with wide open borders, with the Bidenomics, people are fed up. And most people in South Texas, especially if they're Hispanic heritage, they are conservatives by nature. They are conservatives in their beliefs, their family values, their Christian values. They're conservative. So we're focused on South Texas. We're focused on a few other very specific House district races. HD 70 is one of them in Collin County. So we're going to have some funding for that and some work on that. Electing Republicans in the state of Texas is not that hard, especially in the rural areas, because that's who is going to get elected. If you're a nominee, you're kind of on the ballot. Your deal is done. So our goal is to get grassroots activated for Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. President Trump is going to be, it will be fun. He will win, but Texas will go his way. There's no confusion about that. Colin Allred is a fairly a formidable candidate. So Ted Cruz's campaign is working with state party. We put our victory together, so we're going to come out to all the county parties in the next 2 weeks or so with the game plan, with the grassroots activists engagement programs and all of that stuff.
Well, right before we came on air, you were talking a little bit about this new program, GOP University. So before we leave, tell the listeners about GOP University and how you envision that.
So the GOP University is something that has been in my mind ever since I was a county chair, because one of the things we always had issue with, even as the county chair, was when we have new precinct chairs come on board, getting them trained and giving them all the resources in a easy, simple manner was always trouble, because you got technical issues, you got all kinds of problems. So at the state party level, we have the resources to build a GOP university. It's going to be something very similar to like others do, Leadership Institute or Liberty University or anything similar to that, but focused on state of Texas Republican Party. So we'll have all the county chair manuals in it. We'll have all the precinct chair, what to do, what not to do, all the engagement stuff in there, victory programs inside. So it will be available to all the precinct chairs, all the county chairs, and the grassroots activists. We are expecting to have this launched in about next 3 to 4 weeks. So because I wanted to do it beginning of August is our SREC meeting, the first meeting. I want to do it prior to that so they can actually look at it and make any changes to it as well. So
great. So it sounds like activating and training the grassroots is a priority for you at the state party, and that will be very beneficial, I think, in the run-up to the 24 election. Absolutely. Before we go, tell the listeners where they can find you, Abraham.
Well, they can find me on now on GOP's website, Texas GOP. If you go to About and look me up, and my email address is there. Or you can go to abrahamgeorge.com, and on X is where I'm really active, which is Abraham George. Rest of the social media, I'm there, but not necessarily very active up there.
Well, great. Well, congratulations on your victory. We look forward to seeing you and hearing from you more often, and maybe having you back and to see how things went in this election season and the beginning of the next legislative session. I'd like to thank Real News PR, as well as Emilio, our producer, for producing the show, and of course our wonderful guest Abraham George, friend and newly elected chair of the Republican Party of Texas. Until next time, we're adjourned.